Let's imagine the following. You're building a brand new Next.js application and then you store some data in state. You do a little hard refresh and your data is lost. Woof, it's gone forever. Or even worse, you've built this fancy and beautiful filtering system which works on your machine and then you want to send the URL to a friend to show him whatever you found. You send the URL, your friend opens the URL and then all he sees is in default state. Not what you want. But what if I told you that you are doing state wrong? Instead of storing everything in React state, how about we put it right here, inside of the URL? Sounds simple, right? And yeah, it is, but most developers don't use it. But don't worry, in this video I will show you what URL state is, how it works, and how to implement it in your project. So now, without any further ado, let's roll the video. Let's go! Okay, let's dive right into our examples. Let's start with our problem child client-side state. So right here I have created something like a movie browsing something application, meaning we have all of our movies right here. Then I can select a genre like drama. Then for the year I can say, hey, only from the year 2000. Oh, no movies found. Let's again say 1970, year 2, I don't know, only 2000, let's say that. Yeah, that's fine. And for the minimum rating, let's say 10. Oh, no movies found. So this is a filtering example. As you see, there are multiple filters and all of this has been implemented on the client side, meaning I use the useState hook to implement all of this filtering. Let me show you the code example. So I'm in VS Code. This is the client side example. As you see, first of all, this is marked as use client, and this is because I use the useState hook. The useState hook relies on a JavaScript bundle, and that's why it's marked as use client. But let's look at our useState hooks. So we have 4 in total. One is for the genre, then year from, year to, and rating. All of these values have initial values, default values, meaning for our genre all, then for the year from 1970, year to 2023, and then for our rating 0. And then we have unfiltered movies method. This just at the end of the day takes all of our movies. So I have an array with my movies. So we have multiple objects. In total we have 11 objects, or I'm sorry, we have 10 objects, and we have the ID, the title, the genre, the year, and the rating. And this filter method takes all of our movies, the whole array, and filters them. This means if I've selected a genre, for example all, or for example no genre, or the movie genre, we will just filter it. So for example here we say, hey, I only want to get movies where the year is bigger or equal to our year from. And then inside of here I say, hey, I only want to get a movie where the year is smaller or equal to our year 2. And then we have the movie rating, and this means, hey, I only want to get movies where the rating is bigger than or equal to the one which I select. Meaning if I select, for example, 8, then I want to only get movies which are equal to the rating 8 or which are bigger than that. And then I also use the conditional and, meaning this double and sign, and this allows me to, at the end of the day, filter multiple properties at one time. Meaning I can filter the genre, the year from, year to, all at the same time, which is great. So now you might say, okay, this works beautifully, right? We can filter everything and this is what you want, right? And if you look at the implementation, it does not look hard. We have our values and then we have our on change and everything is synchronized, everything updates automatically. We don't really have to do anything. It's super easy. And you're right, the implementation is quite simple. But the problem is, once I do a hard refresh and my session is pretty much lost, all of my values are lost. And that's not what you want, because at the end of the day, filtering should be able to be shared. Meaning if I say I only want to get drama and if I do a hard refresh, it should stay persisted, but it doesn't. And that's not what you want. So let's summarize it quickly. What's the benefit of client-side state? Well, it's super simple to implement, as you see. Only a few useState hooks, and then we have this filter method, and then we are finished. What's the con? What's the problem with client-side state? Well, when we refresh our page, the state is lost. Not good. Secondly, our state can't be shared. This means if I copy the URL and send it to a friend, it's lost. And thirdly, it's relatively hard to debug because state is something which you can't see, right? It works in the background. And when your project becomes relatively complex, it can become a big issue. And I'm talking from experience. I used Redux quite a lot and whoa. Okay, let's skip that. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is URL state. And you know what? We will implement URL state together, because if I go to this URL, we have an error. So let's implement it together. Let's go to our client-side example. I will just copy it and I will paste it into the URL state. I will rename my export default function. So currently I say movie browser. I will just say a movie browser URL. So now this is implemented. And if I now go back, this error will go away. But now we have client-side state. Again, not what we want. We want to have URL state. So let's update our function, our route, whatever. So what we can do is we can first of all start by uncommenting all of our useState hooks. Then underneath them, we want to now get our values from the URL. Because what we'll do is we will store these filters in the URL, meaning we will have a question mark, and then for example genre, and genre will be equal to drama. And then we will click on enter and we will get our values. This means we want to now get our values not from some sort of client-side state, but from our URL. How do we get values from the URL in Next.js? Well, we use our search params. And Next.js has a native hook, and this is called, or we can first of all initialize it, constant search params equals to use search params. This is imported from Next navigation, and this also relies on a JavaScript bundle, meaning use client. We can also delete useState, we don't need it anymore. And since we now get access to our search params, we want to also get the individual values, because again, we have the genre, year from, year to, and rating. This means underneath the search params, I can do a constant genre, and this will be equal not to useState, but to our search params dot get, and then we can get our value. Inside of here, you have to now provide a name. We will name it genre because this is how you want to later on store it in your URL. But now here's the thing, genre, if you hover over it, could be string or null. Because if you go back, you see right now we say genre is equal to drama. But I could delete it and then genre is equal to nothing. This means we want to use an or sign. So if genre is not defined, let's use double vertical lines and we will just provide all. So now we have our genre, so let's copy paste it. I want to get my year from, so constant year from, and from my search params, I want to get the year from. Instead of saying all, we will say 1970. This means if it's not defined. Then let's again copy paste it. I want to get the year to, let's paste it. Right here the value will be year 2, and for the value, or if it's not defined, we will just say 2023. Then we can again copy paste it. This will be for the rating, so constant rating, for the value rating, and if it's not defined, we will just say 0. This means the default value is 0. So now we have all of our values, and if you look at them, it looks very similar to the useState hook. Now here's one thing which I also mentioned. A lot of people implement URL state with the help of the useState hook, search params, and the useEffect hook. This is valid, you can do that, and a lot of people do that. We won't do that, we will implement it a bit differently, but in my opinion, it will be way better. So let me show it to you. We will create an update params function. So I can do a function, this will be update params, and then I want to invoke it and just open it. Inside of here, I want to create a mutable version of our URL, because currently we have our search params, right? And this means I can read them. So it says right here, read only URL search params. I can read them, but I can't mutate them. That's not what I want. I want to now mutate my search params and add new values. This means we want to now do a constant params equals to new URL search params. We want to invoke it, and as an argument, we want to pass our search params. And with that, we now have params which are mutable. I can add values to my URL. So now let's continue. Our params is now an object with multiple values, or it could have multiple values like the genre, year from, year to rating. So one object with multiple values. I want to now convert this object into an array so that I can pretty much map over it. So we will do an object.entries. I will invoke it. Then as an argument, I want to pass my new value. So in my param, I can get a new, or I can say update, and this will be equal to record. Then I want to pass in generic, and we will have in string, comma, string. This means the value and the name will be of type string. Then as an argument, I can pass update, and then we want to do a dot for each. I can invoke it, and as in param, I want to get an array with the key and the value. And then we can just open that and create a standard arrow function. So what exactly do we do inside of here? Well, first of all, we get our object. We pretty much convert it to an array, and then we loop or we iterate over this array. We then get a key and a value, because the key at the end of the day is, for example, genre, and the value is, I don't know, drama or something like that. This is the key and the value. And inside of here, we want to now do an if check. I want to check, hey, do we get a value? Then let's set this value to our params. If not, then let's delete it. So let me show it to you. We will do an if check and we'll say, hey, if we have a value, then let's open it and let's do params.set, and I want to set my key. This means the name, and I want to set the value. So the key again is genre and the value is, for example, drama. And then we want to also do an else statement, and if this is not true, then we will do in params.delete, and I want to delete the value with the key which corresponds. So if I pass genre, then I want to delete genre. So later on, we will use the function like this. I can call update params, we will invoke it, we will destructure it, and then we will pass the name, and then we will also pass the value. So for example, we would say genre, and genre would be, for example, drama. This is how we will use this function, and that's why also my param is a bit weird, record string string. So this is our name, and then this is our value. And as you also see, we do this if else, right? And if I pass, for example, an empty string for genre, then this will evaluate to false, false-C, and then we will just delete the param, meaning genre. So now this is finished, which means we can use our update params. So let's scroll a bit to the bottom. We have our genre, right? And right now I call set genre. That's not what we want to do. Let's delete that. This will be a callback function. As in param, I will get my genre, and then this will be equal to update params. I can invoke it, destructured. I will get my genre, and this will be equal to my value. And also in the param, I'm sorry, this should be value, and then this will be equal to our value. So this now works as expected. But if I now save this and go back and do a hard refresh, my URL isn't updated. What's the problem? Well, currently this function only pretty much does the internal work, but it does not update the URL. We want to now do it manually. So for that, we have to get access to our URL, and we do that with the router. So we can initialize our router. So constant router will be equal to use router. Use router is imported from Next navigation. And now inside of here, we can go underneath the object entries, and we can do in router.push. I can invoke it. I want to use upticks. And since we want to add at the end of the day a new param, we want to add the question mark and then our dynamic value, which is our params.toString, and then I want to invoke it. We can now save this, and if I go back and do a hard refresh and go to crime, our URL updates. So let me quickly go again to our index page, so URL state, and if I now go to crime, my URL updates with genre crime. And if I now again go back, we also have one error for our rating. What's the problem? Well, if you hover over it, operator bigger than and equal cannot be applied to types number and string. This means right here where we get our rating, we want to just convert it to a number. So I can just copy it, and we will do a number uppercased dot pass float. I can invoke it and then pass it as an argument. So now we can use our update params function for all of our values, for all of our inputs. So let me also show it to you for the year from. I can delete everything inside of the onChange. We will again create a callback function. I want to get my event, and this will be equal to update params. I will invoke it, destructured. I will get a year from, and then this will be equal to e.target.value. And if I save this and again go back, I can go to my year from, and I can say 2000. And as you see, my URL updates and my movies update. If I go to all genres, we again see some movies. And as you see, everything works as expected, and that's great. So let's summarize the benefits. First of all, everything is persistent. This means if I do a hard refresh, everything is still here. If I copy the URL and open it in a new tab, everything is still here. This means we persist the state and our URL is shareable, which you want to have. Another benefit is SEO, because at the end of the day, it's easier for a bot to crawl your website if it can also analyze the URL, because the URL already tells the bot a lot of information about the query itself. So this all sounds great, right? But there's one thing which I haven't talked about. So URL state itself is scalable in production, it's fine. But in development, you'll get a lot of problems once your project becomes bigger. What do I mean with that? Well, search params aren't type safe. So right here we have our genre, right? So we have our genre and then we pass the value. But what is if instead of saying genre, I just pass some sort of gibberish? And if I save this and go back and do a hard refresh, and then for my genre I pass, I don't know, thriller, then now we have AS something 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 equals to thriller. Whereas the type safety, there is no type safety, and that's a huge problem. At the start, it won't be a big problem because you can double check, paste it, it all works. But once your application becomes quite big, it will be a huge problem. So how can you fix it? How can you get search params which are type safe? And maybe how can we get search params which work like the useState hook, but at the same time still update the URL? Well, there's one library which is called nuqs. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I think it's nuqs. But at the end of the day, it's a type safe search params state manager for React. So not only Next.js, but also Remix and whatever you use. So as mentioned, it's type safe, and also it works very similar to useState. This means we don't have to create any functions anymore, but we have our setter, or we have our getter and setter. And with that, we can update our URL. It almost works like the useState hook, but instead of using internal state, we use the URL, which is super cool. So let's head over to documentation, installation, and let's install nuqs. I will go back, I will open my terminal, and I can paste it inside of here. Oh, and by the way, if you know how to pronounce it, please let me know in the comments, because I have no clue. So this has been installed, I can restart my dev server, and since nuqs is a very general React framework, we want to use an adapter. So we use the Next.js app router, so this means we want to wrap our children with the nuqs adapter. I can just copy the nuqs adapter, let's go to our layout, and then I will just wrap the children in the nuqs adapter. I can also import it from nuqs adapters next, and now we are already finished with that. So what we can now do is again open our Explorer. Then I have a nuqs folder within page.tsx. Let's go to our client-side example. I will again copy everything and paste it in the nuqs file. Then I want to also rename my function. This will now be a movie browser nuqs, and then I can save it and go back. So if I go back to my index page, localhost 3000, we want to now go to the nuqs example, and now we have again our client-side example. So let's update this. Instead of using the useState hook, we want to now use the native hook provided by nuqs. And this is the useQueryState hook. So instead of using useState, I want to get my useQueryState. We still have our getter and setter, but now we have to pass as an argument the name of the key. So this isn't all, but this will be our genre, and we want to also pass in default value. And since params or search params are always a string, we can just add a comma, the structured, and we can pass in default value, which will be all. So now we have initialized useQueryState. Let's also do the same for the other three useState hooks. So I will just paste useQueryState, and we of course want to update the initial values, or not the initial values, but the keys. So this will be the year from key, and then this will be the year to key. I can paste it. And for the rating, this will be rating in strings. So let's pass it. Of course, again, we want to pass initial values. And the interesting thing for the year from is that this isn't a string, right? Year from is a number, an integer. This means we can use something which is called a parser. So there are a few built-in parsers, and one is for numbers, for integers. So we can add a parse as integer. This is imported from nuqs, and we can also use the method with default. And the default value for the year from will be 1970. So now you see we don't really store a string, but we pretty much store a number. From the URL, we will still get a string, but this will pass as a number. Let's do the same for the year 2. So I can add a comma, pass as integer, and then we can call the with default method, and this will be 2023. Let's also do the same for the rating, and this won't be pass as integer, but pass as float, because again, this is a decimal number like 5.8 or 10.0 or whatever. So let's import pass as float from nuqs, and I can again use the with default method, and this will be 0. So now we have implemented nuqs. I can also delete the useState hook. I don't need it anymore, so the import for that. And now we have an error inside of our filtered movies filter method or function. So inside of here, we currently have an error of argument of type number is not assignable to type string. So we can delete this number pass int because it is already a number. And let's also delete this number pass int. We don't need it. For rating, this is also fine. Let's now continue. We now have an error for the input and to be exact for the onChange handler. What's exactly the problem? Well, the problem is onChange provides a string. So this e.target.value is a string, but we want to get a number because this is the year from, and inside of our useQueryState, we say pass as integer. So I want to convert this e.target.value to a number. I will do a number.parseInt. I can invoke it, and then as an argument, I can pass e.target.value. Let's also do the same for the year 2. I can just paste it inside of here, number parseInt, and now we are finished. This means if I now save this and again go back and do a hard refresh, everything should work. So for the genre, drama. Wow, the URL updated. For the year from, 2000. Let's see. Wow, the URL updated. Year 2, 2025. Wow, the URL updated. And for the rating, 2. And if I do a float number, a decimal number, we see 3.2. Wow, this was so simple. Let's again look at the code example. All we did is that we changed useState for useQueryState. We added our own parser or the parser provided by nuqs. We added a default value, and we are finished. There's nothing more. If you again open the URL state example, we had to create our own function, update params. We had to do this router.push, and then we also had to deal with type safety. With nuqs, we don't have this problem. We don't have to create a separate function. We don't have to worry about type safety. Everything is type safe, and it almost works and it looks the same to the useState hook. Super cool. Now this is all great because at the end of the day, okay, we have now type safety. It's similar to useState. It's easy to implement. The bundle size isn't big. But another benefit is that it's very easy to configure nuqs. This means you can add options like, for example, the history. Do you want to use push or replace? Then you can set scroll to true or false. If you set scroll to true, it will scroll to the top once the URL updates. If you set it to false, then the scroll behavior won't update. This means if you are at the bottom, you won't be scrolled to the top automatically. You can also, for example, set shallow routing to true or false. And one very, very cool thing is at the end of the day, the throttling URL updates. So I'm not sure if you knew it, but Safari's rate limit is much higher and requires a throttle of 120 milliseconds or 300 milliseconds for even older versions. In Chrome, it's around 50 or 40, something like that, so it's way faster. And the nice thing is that you can update it, you can change the rate limit, the throttle, using nuqs. Super, super cool. Let's now summarize this video. When should you use client-side state and when should you use URL state? So you should use URL state, for example, whenever you use filters. Filters means, for example, an e-commerce website or some sort of car trading platform like AutoTrader, where you have filters and where you want to share URLs and where you want to have state which is persisted on hard refreshes. So whenever you use filters, you want to also use URL state. Whenever you use pagination, you want to also use URL state because at the end of the day, your pages should persist across refreshes and navigations. Then you want to also use URL state whenever you have search queries. This means when you have, like, for example, the search bar and when you type something inside of there, you want to have it persist. That's why you want to use URL state. And I'm sorry for my grammar. That's quite trash, but who cares? Then you want to also use URL state whenever you have sorting, like sort by newest, by oldest, most expensive, cheapest, blah, blah, blah. Then you want to also use URL state because on a hard refresh, it should stay persisted. But when should you use client-side state? Because client-side state isn't bad. It's very good and it's very valuable. So you should use client-side state if it's an internal application, if you don't really care if it's still persisted when you do a hard refresh. So let's just say internal application without state persistence. And also, I wouldn't use URL state if I have a super complex and very nested state, because URL state has actually a few limitations. So if you go to limits, you will see there's a max URL length. For Chrome, it's 2 MB, Firefox around 65,000 characters, Safari around 80K, and Edge only 2,000. This means you have certain limitations, and that's something you have to know. This means if it's super complex, if your query or your filtering or whatever, if it's very, very complex, then URL state might not work for your application. So yeah, everyone, this is the difference between client-side state, URL state, and why you should probably use URL state in 90% of use cases. As you see, it's relatively easy to implement, especially if you're using nuqs. Please don't forget to head over to their GitHub and to drop a star. This will probably help them out a lot, so please do it. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you could learn a lot. I hope I can see you in the next video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me and to my heart, so please do it. And now enjoy your day, and I hope I can see you in the next video. Bye! Whew. All right, friends. Oh my god. So it's 15:16. Why is Siri working? I hope, I don't know, do you see something? You probably don't see anything. Yeah, enjoy your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Oh my god, I have to drink some water. Oh man, my back.